And we will open this meeting with opportunity for bill introductions. Representative Barth.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I would like to introduce RS 0720 into committee. This is an act concerning municipalities enacting the Kansas Municipal Employee Whistleblower Act, establishing legal protections for certain municipal employees who report or disclose unlawful or dangerous conduct.
If there's no objections, it will be so introduced.
Thank you.
Are there any other bill introductions to bring? If you'll come to the microphone, state your name and your bill. Going once, going twice. And we're gone. Thank you so much. And I know a number of people here online, and here in the gallery to hear one bill. And we will begin the hearing on HB 2025. Just a point of information, will not be any decisions made today. Our hearing process is set so that in most cases we hear something and then we deliberate and come back and take care of that. So we will begin with oral proponents on this bill. And first is Representative Ken Corbett. And if you'll come to the microphone, sir. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Ken, would you like to have a seat? We're going to have an explanation from the reviser. Thank you, Jason, and thank you, minority member.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, real briefly, House Bill 2025 is a bill that I believe this committee saw last biennium as well. It would amend KSA 12-749 and repeal 3 other statutes dealing with the authority of cities to apply planning and zoning regulations to that area that is outside of the city limits and extends 3 miles from that city boundary. In 1965, state law was amended to permit cities to extend the application of their planning and zoning regulations to this area. And so 12-749 contains that general authority. The other 3 statutes that are attached to the memo from our office provide some procedures and limitations on adoption of those regulations. If that general authority is stricken, as you can see on page 1 of the bill in lines 11 through 15, then the other 3 statutes are unnecessary, and therefore the bill repeals those statutes outright. They would be taken completely out of the statute books. So the city would then be limited to only applying its planning and zoning regulations within the territory of the city and not be able to extend that beyond into that 3-mile area. This would go into effect this summer, July 1st, on publication of the statute book. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Reviser Long from the committee? Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reading through the bill and kind of understanding what we're repealing here that's being proposed, can you give us a little bit further definition of subdivision? It goes quite a bit into subdivision, establishing subdivision regulations. Can you give us a little bit more explanation of what the subdivision entails from a legal standpoint and what all capabilities that gives them still within the proposed amendments?
And how is this pertinent to our discussion?
Because by amending this, it still gives, I just want to understand what subdivision means and what they can actually do still today within those, with the legal rights that they have.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Well, generally subdivision regulations are, just as the name implies, subdividing land into smaller plots of land for further development and the planning and layout of the city. Mr. Chairman, there are many statutes dealing with planning and zoning and the subdivision of lands by cities and counties. I can surely, I can provide the committee with that information at a later date if you'd like me to, rather than try to summarize all of those statutory provisions here in committee.
Is there anything specific, or would you be satisfied with that? Okay. Any other questions for Revisor Long? Okay. Thank you, sir. Next, we have testimonies beginning with Representative Ken Corbett of 54th District. If you'd come to the microphone, this will be for proponents.
Good morning, Chairman and fellow representatives. Can I pass that now? Hold on a second. So I'm here to testify in support of 2025. Many of my constituents and yours have been asking for this for decades. To most Kansans, their property is their #1 asset. HB 2025 removes the 3-mile circle where cities have complete control over all zoning issues. People call and say to me, how can the city control my property? I've talked to several people. It'd be like Missouri setting the rules and Kansas have to live by them. It's I've had plenty of my constituents. What they do in the city, they also do the planning, and so in that circle, there are a lot of family farms, thousands of acres, and it gets punitive. They have to go by city building codes and whatever. So I got one more thing here I want to bring up. This is in your packet. This is part of the ruling from Attorney General. Before granting municipalities the authority to the legislature should be carefully consider the effects on county residents who cannot elect a city leader. And I know if this was all turned around and you were the other way around, you wouldn't be able to really plan your farm or divide your property. So I think it's time to get it out of committee and give it a shot on the floor, and give these county people who are being abused a chance to get some freedom. I'll stand for questions.
All right, we'll take questions after all the proponents, and thank you, Representative Corbett. Next, we have Beth Salmons, citizen. Would you come to the microphone? Thank you for coming.
Thank you for hearing us. I appreciate this. I'm here to testify as a proponent to this repeal of 2025. Our constitutional founders guaranteed the right to private property and based that on, it gives, on your freedom to own property. And your freedom is actually based on that. Over these years, it has been eroded by government and judicial rulings, legislative encumbrances on these properties. And this 3-mile rule is one of those gross overreaches. What it does, it lets the cities tell people in the county what they can do with their land if it is within those 3-mile limits. I'm not good at talking about it.
Hey, take your time. We're just a small group here. There may be 1 million people out there interested, but just a small group of people here.
Okay. But now the city can tell the county commissioners that they don't have any rights to govern or to zone that land within that 3-mile zone. The people that live in that 3-mile zone can't vote for the people that are making the rules over them. They can't run for offices for those positions that are ruling over them. And I'm going to change my testimony up here a little bit. I have Cato Institute quote in the testimony that's really good and applies to this, but I was just informed this morning, we have a problem with this right now. I was informed that there's a 20-acre plot of ground within that 3-mile zone north of Waverly. Person wants to sell it, person wants to buy it. That person only wants to buy it if he can put a building up on that 20 acres. So he went to the city to see about getting that zoning or being able to get permits to put that building up. City says, well, we don't have anything to do with that. You'll have to go to the county. He goes to the county. County said, well, city has zoning rights over that because it's within that 3-mile zone. And so, you know, what are we supposed to tell this person to do? He's caught up in this legislation that is not allowing him to sell his property. So you can see how this rule has eroded people's property rights and what they can do with their property within that 3-mile zone. Sorry, I've got voice
Doing
problems.
fine, doing fine.
Lost it about 3 weeks ago. So I think that's pretty much my point. I do want to say we're not a bunch of high-paid lobbyists. We're just citizens here who feel like these property rights need to be restored to those people in that 3-mile zone.
Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. And if there's any questions for you, we'll catch you in just a little bit.
Okay.
All right? Angel Cushing, are you here? Thank you, Angel. And Kansas citizen. Okay.
I'm going to just jump right in as to what got me involved in this issue right here. This is the zoning regulations that was introduced to Lyon County in 2019. And I am outside of Lyon County by about 20 miles, far, far north on the northern end of the county. Right here, and under walls and fences, it says, no barbed wire or other sharp fences and no electrically charged fence of any type shall be erected or maintained. Goes on about construction and those type of fences. When I went into my county zoning administrator, he said, Angel, you're interpreting that incorrectly. So I looked up interpretation. Right here, it says, where the conditions imposed by any provision of these regulations upon the use of land or structures are either more restrictive or less restrictive than comparable, the regulations which are more restrictive shall govern unless otherwise accepted. Said, okay, so it says here that you have to go with the more restrictive one. And he said, Angel, he said, the city doesn't have jurisdiction up in Lyon County. Okay, so I went and looked up jurisdiction. The jurisdiction of these regulations shall apply to all land located within the corporate limits of the city of Emporia and within Lyon County as established by the joint agreement of the governing bodies of the city of Emporia and Lyon County, Kansas. They had jurisdiction. So we began in getting involved in this issue, and in preparation for this testimony, my written testimony spells this all out. And I decided that that was long and complicated for anybody that might be reading this that is not in local governing, that doesn't handle zoning regularly. So I did a diagram, which I gave to y'all to hand out, and it spells it out very, very quickly. The point that I really want to make is if you look, these are green and red or blue and red because I want to show you the political dynamics. Emporia has Emporia College there. They're primarily Democrat. God bless them. They have the right to be, right? Outside of the city limits, you're in Flint Hills, Kansas. That's cowboy country. That's ranchers. That's Republicans. That metropolitan area as it stands right now, and on the back of it, I have screenshots here of the board members. Every single which of them live inside of the city of Emporia. And do you know how I verified their addresses? It turns out they have been contributing to Democrat campaigns. God bless them, that's their right. But imagine if I were a Republican and I now had land management policy over the city of Emporia that's primarily Democrat. Everybody would throw a fit. But the most important part about that is I have quoted Kansas law here, 12-75, that says the combined zoning must have at least one person that lives within that 3-mile area. Emporia has none, zero, zip. They're all inside of the city of Emporia. None. So there are 7 Democrats ruling over Republicans who do not get to vote for anybody or have any say over who those zoning board members are. And I show the commission there is the same way. Our commission is actually commissioners. There are 3 from the city and there are 2 from the county. Nobody within that area that has no representation gets to vote for any of these city commissioners. They are outside of that jurisdiction. They have no representation. It has been stolen from them. And I ask that you please return it to them. The history is beautiful. I appreciate the history of the reviser who brought this up, that it came to be in 1965. Do you know what else was going on in 1965? The Sagebrush Rebellion. Inventory lists by the federal government of land they wanted to take. If you go back and you read the original dissertations and theses on metropolitan area planning, the goal was to stop urban sprawl and protect open space. So I think that we here in Kansas are a little bit smarter than that. We know how to control that pretty well without having people that do not represent us tell us how to live. Please repeal this. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, ma'am. And Sherry Grogan, President of the Rural Leavenworth Board of Directors for Leavenworth, Inc. Yes, ma'am. You're on with the light.
Good morning. And members of the committee, my name is Sherry Grogan, President of Rural Leavenworth, Inc. RLI is a nonprofit, nonpartisan citizens advocacy group, and what compelled us to form this organization was this very specific issue. Back in 2019, Basehor City tried to pursue the 3-mile authority, but citizens rose up. It did not get implemented. The reason why, though, is the city tried to implement it using the full 3-mile authority. It might have been a different situation if the full 3 miles had not been pursued. The reason why citizens opposed this is that it was viewed as overreach. Citizens in the rural area were not able to vote on the city elected officials, and it would have been increased regulations. Many of the citizens were not in favor of regulation without representation. We still believe that the ETJ extraterritorial jurisdiction option is not a very good approach, and it should be used with extreme caution as outlined in Attorney General Kobach's opinion in 2024. We also agree with the League of Municipalities that this is a complex issue and deserving of an interim committee. Observations and concerns. We have had a lot of growth in Leavenworth County. It's actually unprecedented. We're one of the largest growing cities, Basehor City, in the state. Some of the things that we've seen is developments are going in. There's a lack of infrastructure, in particular sewer. So the development is at a lower density than the land use maps show. So we're not using our land as effectively as maybe we should. There's also been leapfrog development, and that makes it very difficult for annexation. It's not adjacent to the city. And then sometimes if the city would try to annex that in, it would have been an island annexation. We've also looked at some examples in the SB 279 testimony back in 2021, where there are a couple of towns in Nemaha County that tried to use ETJ to prevent wind turbines from being located near their cities. So overall, you can see that the ETJ might encourage development, it could slow it down, or it might even stop it. So there are various ways that that tool could be used. So our suggestion is to really look at this a little bit closer. Try to understand where in Kansas is this actually being used, and in what circumstances. How long has it been in place? Was it in a zoned county or an unzoned county? It's important to understand before you change the law what the unintended consequences might be. There are also ways that you can, or I should say our cities and counties should work together. to avoid ETJ. What is actually compelling cities to use this? Is it a power struggle? Is it, you know, they can't get along, can't agree on what the land use maps might look like, or even the subdivision regulations? So with that, I would just say use caution as you look to change the law. But we did testify as a proponent.
Thank you, ma'am. And last one for verbal is Desiree Subbatera, citizen, and thank you for being here, ma'am. You can go to the microphone, take your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for letting me testify. We have had a lot of things happen in the Geary County and Junction City area, and it hasn't been good. I support the city. I want the city to be able to grow. I want it to succeed, but I want the county to also. With this 3-mile zone, they are encroaching on our rights, and they've already explained it pretty well. But I want to read this quote from one of the testimonies back in 2023 from the Kansas League of Municipalities. If there are counties not actively engaged in the process, that needs to be addressed with them. Every citizen in a county who lives in an ETJ, which is this 3-mile zone, has the representation through their county commissioners, who have direct say into the processes and actions taken by cities in the zone. This is the part that I find interesting. If a county or county commissioner indicates otherwise, that is an issue with those elected officials, not the ETJ and current laws in place. That is totally inaccurate. Is anyone familiar with the local agreements that happen between cities and counties? This really, you are familiar with it? Okay. Well, ours only provides for an advisory council. They are appointed, they are not elected, they cannot vote. We have 3 county commissioners, 5 city commissioners. Who rules? It's those 5 votes that rule. We have no representation in the 3-mile zone. We also had a situation here. Are you familiar with the EMS situation that happened in Geary County? I'm sure most of you are. Our county tried to communicate with the city. They even attended city meetings. And the city basically told the county in one meeting, and it is recorded, that the county did not know how to govern. So how do cities and counties, city and county people live differently. And that needs to be respected. It can't be, city life can't be pushed onto the rural people, and the rural life cannot be pushed onto the city people. We need to be able to live, just live as we want, free. Now, we also had a situation in Geary County, in Junction City specifically. We found out that they were bringing a slaughterhouse, or trying to bring a slaughterhouse. This is a kill floor, not just a processing plant. They were going to bring this in the 3-mile zone. Well, we in the 3-mile zone did not approve of this, and most of the city did not approve of it, but the city would not listen. Well, the city manager told us one night before the meeting, my husband and I, that if we, that he had the power to take the right away from us to run livestock on our property. Now, if this is how this 3-mile zone is going to be used, and they have the full voting power to take our rights away from us, something has to be done with this bill. Totally changed, totally thrown out. Something has to happen. In 2023, were any of you sitting here in this committee in 2023? Okay. And I wrote this up in my testimony. In 2023, we had a new, well, the areas were divided differently for representatives and senators. Well, we had a city commissioner that ran for a state representative, and he won. He sat on this committee, and he did not give up his city seat. He stayed a city commissioner. He voted Well, and I looked at the committee itself. Go back and look, and I re-verified this when I typed up my testimony. Those representing this committee at that time, they were mostly people with city backgrounds, representing cities. It shocked me. And that's when I talked to Ken Corbett at that time and let him know. Our representative, who was supposed to represent us rurally, not just the city, I am guessing that he is probably the one that had our city manager come here and testify. And I'll let you know that our county did not know about it. I went to the county and asked them. They had no idea that those bills were being heard. Now, shouldn't our representative have contacted the county and the city, not just the city? So that's why I have a problem with this, and we need to have some separation of power here. I think the county needs to control the county and the city needs to control the city. And that's all I will say.
Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Okay, I have a question for the revisor.
Mr. Long, do we have guidelines about impugning the motives of sitting or former committee members? I know we have several city councilors on the committee at this time.
And it's accurate that the chair should have called that. And I went ahead and listened through, but there's individuals who are not here to be able to speak their own case, and in some cases, maybe others weren't here when something else happened. We're dealing with one ordinance to a bill to consider for this committee, and not what individuals' parties are, not what individuals' personal votes are when they're on another body, or whether they're placed on this committee to be used for bringing things to the body as a whole. We have a body of 125 people who are representatives from all over the state. We have a few people in here that are municipal, a few people that are county, and a few people that have never been in a political office at all. And so I would ask that comments in the future and in this meeting, there will be questions maybe come to you or questions volleyed back and forth, but please abstain from impugning people's character or assuming their motive in doing something. I understand the passion. I understand the difficulty of the situation when you're bringing something to help your community, but that goes for the body as well. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to state for the record, I am not one of those representatives that serve in any city or county government.
I've been in a bunch of it. And questions for the conferees? I do have one if no one else is stepping up right now. For Desiree, if you could come to the microphone. Desiree, were you the one that said you had issues with the county didn't have any authority because they only had 3 members and the city had 5?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know how your planning board is set up. If planning boards just don't generally have 5 members and 3 altogether to make 8.
No, it's not the planning members. It's the city. It has the city has 5 representatives,
Right.
and the county has 3.
Good.
So when it comes down to voting on something that happens in that zoned area, the county has no power. Yeah, we're outvoted by the city. Now, there is a cure for that. We could elect more commissioners on the county, but then the city will do the same thing, and it's going to be a non-ending process.
Right.
So that's what. And I apologize for my comments on there, but I'm just stating facts because everything that I stated earlier, it is on video. Everything I have done at the city and county and Geary County, and it's all recorded. So,
We have a lot of things recorded we wish weren't there. Also.
Yeah,
also,
right,
yeah.
and it happens.
Uh,
I have made numerous mistakes myself,
Thank
but
you.
I'm just trying to call out what's right, and how people should be able to have their
You
freedom.
have one question.
Okay.
Thank you for being here today. Are your city and county commission seats determined by population or by geographic boundaries?
Our city commission is strictly city members, now our county. And that is something that I find odd here in Kansas. I am from Nebraska. County commissioners in Nebraska were strictly county members. And city commissioners were strictly city members. In the county here, city people can run for the county commission. So, and it seems odd to me because I think the county should be represented by the county and the city should be, that's just my opinion. I have no.
I guess I didn't convey. The lines that are drawn, like our districts are drawn at the state level by population. How are your lines drawn? Are your city commission seats for the whole city or a part of the city?
Yes,
The
yes.
counties, like?
No,
the
it's not
whole-
divided. We are not that big. We are only about a population of about 20,000. So it's not a large committee. They were talking about having it divided, the elections divided by districts, but they have a hard time getting people to run for office, just like anywhere else, so.
Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask that each of the people, and this is after the fact, obviously, with regard to the oral testimony we've received already, that they would disclose whether or not the county they're representing, and these are the citizens, because I know the League and KAC and so forth are representing groups, would disclose whether or not they're a part of a zone county or a non-zone county, because that does make a difference in this deliberation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions for any of the other conferees? Committee? All right. We will move on to, are there neutral testimony. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak as a proponent for 2025? Okay, not seeing any. We do have one. Okay. Yes, come to the microphone if you'd state your name and where you're from.
Andy Petra, and I'm from Junction City, Kansas. And I'm at the age that I wanted to retire. I run a few cows. I've got my grass in Geary County. I'm in the 3-mile zone. And our city manager told me that if I sold my cattle, that I was not going to be able to put any cows back on my grass. What do I do with my grass? I can't sell it. Would you buy it if you can't put cows on it? This is very unfair, very unconstitutional. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
And since you're conferee, and I'll ask you a question, did they say that because of zoning they've zoned your area non-agricultural?
Well, it started out with the slaughterhouse, and the city was going to annex and zone it. Well, once they zone it, if I sell my cows, I can't replace them. I can't sell my ground to a rancher to put cows on it. Well, how, what am I supposed to do with my ground? I worked my whole life for what I've got. And here I am.
Appreciate your testimony, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies, I was not on microphone mic. Mike Taylor?
Yes.
The County Commissioners Association with a neutral testimony.
Yes. So my organization represents the 360 plus elected county commissioners in all 105 counties. So you can imagine that I have a mix of opinions with the people that I'm representing. which is one of the reasons why we are neutral. What we're going to ask for, I think along with others, and you've already heard some testimony, is that this is a really complex issue. And I think, no offense to the committee, but you're not going to solve it in a 1-hour hearing. We would ask that it go to an interim committee and be studied. We're talking about 60 years worth of law that's on the books. It involves utility agreements. It involves a number of complex things that you're not going to really hear about today. I do agree that cooperation between county commissioners and city council officials is critical in working out interlocal agreements. And we've heard some cases today where that is apparently not happening. And I think I would like to have some more time to work on that kind of issue with my clients who are elected county commissioners. So again, our testimony is that this is obviously a hot button serious problem. I think we would need to spend more time studying it, and we would ask for an interim committee over the summer to really dive into the details and all the unintended consequences that might happen if this bill advances right now. I'll stand for
We're
questions.
certainly making note of that comment, and we will move forward. Thank you, sir. And now Jay Hall from the Kansas Association of Counties.
Thank you. I am Jay Hall, the Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Kansas Association of Counties. We too would be asking for an interim committee. As Mike just mentioned, we do have a lot of complexities within this particular thing. We want to make sure that by solving one problem, we don't create 2 or 3 others, particularly because, as Mike mentioned, we have 60 years worth of not just law, but we also have 60 years worth of development that is caught within this, and we don't want to disrupt existing development or coming development because we make changes without realizing what those unintended consequences might be. So we would ask that we get an interim committee so we can study this issue, so we can make sure that we don't create multiple problems by solving this problem here today. And I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
This is the appropriate time. Is there any questions for Mr. Hall? Or yes, Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This would be a question for you, Jay. It's interesting you brought up like utilities and development, things that are currently going on today. Is there anything that with utilities that states because they're in a 3-mile zone, I'm not going to provide them electricity or water or anything like that today?
So the league may have more answers on this exactly, but from my understanding, if you are within the 3-mile zone, the city can provide you services if they choose to exercise that extraterritorial jurisdiction. If they don't exercise the extraterritorial jurisdiction, then I don't think that they have to provide services, although you can come to an agreement with them on those services.
Okay. A follow-up question I have then too, I mean, I don't foresee that they would just shut off people's utilities when they're paying customers, but I would like to get more information from the cities on that. And then development. Why would that ever create a problem from a development standpoint? Is there an agreement that says you have to be in that 3-mile rule? And why can't they just have the freedom to go through the actual process without that? I mean, I think there's counties that don't have and cities that don't have a 3-mile rule that are still able to do development. So can you please address that as well?
Yeah, so if you're a developer and you've been working within that extraterritorial zone and you've been working with the city on your project, and now that 3-mile zone goes away, all of the work that you've done with the city up to this point now goes away as well, and you have to start the process over with the county because you've been working with the city because you're in that extraterritorial zone. Whereas now, if you're, let's say you're in an unzoned county, for example, you've been working with the city and now that extraterritorial is gone. Now you have different standards that you need to apply, whether you're in a zoned or unzoned county. So that's what we're trying to avoid, is leaving developments in a lurch because they have been working under one set of rules and we changed the rules on them midstream.
Got a question from Vice Chair?
Your recommendations by both of you on by Mr. Taylor and yourself was an interim committee. How is that going to, I mean, we're going to sit down with a few senators and representatives and discuss this issue, but at some point that recommendation will come. and we'll vote the next session. I guess I'm struggling with seeing how that might solve our problem. And maybe, I know there's a lot of moving parts, but, this thing's been before us a couple of times. We've heard it a couple of years and it's been around, and give us your thoughts on how that'll solve what we're trying to deal with.
So I think one of the reasons that we are asking for an interim is we've heard from the folks that are here today that are having problems within the 3 mile zone. The people that aren't here today, though, are the people that are happy with the 3 mile zone because it's working well for either their living situation, whether that be residential, or it's working well for their business that they've developed. So we want to make sure that we're hearing from all of those voices as well, so that if there are any changes that we make to this, that we make changes that satisfy the people that have a problem with the status quo, but that we don't disrupt things for those individuals that are happy with the current arrangement.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions for Mr. Hall or for anyone else? Thank you, Representative Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be more for the reviser. There are so many variables here. So we have already heard in one of our testimonies how many cities actually participate in the ETJ. I don't know if anybody knows that. And are they similar ordinances? Do they vary? Does the 3 mile annexation, every time there's an annexation, does that 3 mile radius grow, or does it stay the same for a certain period of time? We are rural, and we are, it's like we have 2 different countries inside of one state. I always say that. We're so different. And so, I don't know, there's so many things swirling through my mind right now. I need to completely understand what we're looking at and how many counties and cities this impacts. And if there's possible amendments on class size of cities and 3 mile, 2 mile, 1 mile. I don't know. We've discussed that I'm sorry, that was a loaded question. So loaded. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that is, I took that as a request for some information that we can certainly work with our research colleagues on putting some of those numbers together in terms of the cities and counties that currently make use of this or impacted by this. In terms of other proposals, if there are specific proposals for alternatives, our office and myself are perfectly happy to discuss those with members of the committee, or even provide memos to the committee on different proposals at the chairman's request.
Thank you, sir, and that duly noted. Representative Pishney.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and not a question, but a comment. I think the representative who just spoke answered the previous representative's question on the need for an interim. Thank you.
Anyone else comments? Comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Hall. And yes, Representative Wolf.
I am on another committee that has someone in the building right now. I hate that I'm leaving. I promise I will go back and look. So I haven't heard the opponent's view, and I will research that. I will watch this, but I want you to know that I'm not leaving because I've heard the side I want. I will come back and check it out. But I can't right now. Thank you.
And I will move on to, is there any other who wish to speak neutral? At this point, we have 2 neutrals, Mr. Taylor and Mr. Hall. Is there anyone? I have one written by Heidi Harris, the Kansas Association of County Planning and Zoning Officials. And you have that testimony, and it is posted online as well. So moving on to opponents. We will go ahead, and we have, and we've duly noted the comments that have been made, but we also have opponents that are here to testify as well. And I would welcome first Trey Hawking, the city manager of Emporia. Thank you, Trey, for your attendance, and come to the mic.
Morning, Chairman, committee members. Trey Hawking. I'm the city manager of Emporia. I want to talk about Emporia in particular. I'll let Spencer talk about 3 mile zoning in particular. We don't have 3 mile zoning in Lyon County. And I want to tell you why. So Ms. Cushing talked about ELC, talked about the joint comprehensive use plan that we did. That came back. Citizens rightfully raised questions. So, and then in December of 2021, right after I started, our MOU between the city of Emporia and Lyon County expired. And Lyon County did not want to continue that MOU at that point in time. So that meant that the 3 mile zoning went away. Because Lyon County is zoned, so we can only zone outside of the city with the county commission's permission. So why does our planning commission just have city members on it? Because we just right now are zoning inside the city limits. We can't zone outside the city limits without reaching a new interlocal agreement with Lyon County. So we've had conversations about that. We don't want to do 3 mile zoning anymore. One thing, Emporia sits between 2 rivers, and it does not make sense to zone east of the city because we can't grow east of the city because of the limitations placed by those 2 rivers. So our only real growth path is northwest of the city. If you drive down the turnpike, you'll see our newer aquatic center right there. That's how Emporia will grow over the next couple decades, is that way, because that's the natural growth path. It's created a interesting situation. We had Stormont Vale. They want to build a new facility in Lyon County, Emporia. They bought land that was outside of the city of Emporia. Lyon County was not set up with their zoning regulations for that sort of commercial apparatus. So Stormont asked, they put a moratorium on new construction because they didn't have the right zoning in place. In the meantime, Stormont asked to be zoned into the city. Our commissioners are annexed into the city. Our commissioners did do that voluntary annexation because we have those sorts of commercial zones available. So it's created a push and pull, but right now, simply what you guys have to recognize is because the county commission has not wanted to do 3 mile zoning and that agreement expired, we don't have 3 mile zoning outside the city of Emporia currently. I'll stand for any questions at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rock. Spencer Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. I am Spencer Duncan with the League of Kansas Municipalities. I think you'll hear from some of the other opponents what I will call the nuts and bolts issues and complications with this, so I'm not going to take any time to rehash those specifics. I will just cover a few quick points. I'm not into hyperbole. Hopefully you figured that out by now, but it is not an understatement to stand up here and say, if you passed this now and it took effect July 1, chaos would ensue. That is why for 3 years I've stood up here when we've discussed this and said, if this legislature is ready to really dig into this and make some changes, fine, let's get to an interim. And what would an interim solve, to your point, Representative Blex? Things like maybe cities recognize, this isn't our official position today, but maybe 3 miles is too big, right? Maybe there are some adjustments we can make. Maybe we need to have some more uniformity in what interlocal agreements should or should not exist. To the point of water lines. Right now, sure, I'll build water lines. I will say we always find it ironic that folks move to the county, don't want anything to do with the city, and then the first call they make is, can I get city water, right? But should we be required, if there's no more 3 mile zone, to provide that? What's the cost, right? So those are all those questions on top of the list of things we've looked at that an interim could dig into to decide if we're really going to do this, what does that uncoupling look like as we shrink that zone or make changes to it. So we have not been opposed to digging more into this issue. We've just had concerns with, again, this process and sort of doing it July 1 and then leaving cities and counties who you can tell there's already, depending upon what city and county you're in, some friction to go figure it out on their own, right? That we're not sure that's the best path either. The second point I want to make is I do think there continues to be some misinformation on the authority of counties in these situations. We as cities cannot just go do whatever we want in the county unless the county is allowing us to go do whatever we want. So I absolutely understand the frustrations of those individuals living in the counties and what they're facing. But they either have land use management agreements or they don't. They either have zoning plans or they don't, right? They either have interlocal agreements or they don't. And action or inaction creates a scenario in which at the end of the day, county commissioners in those counties have taken the approach that they're hands off, they're just going to let what happens happens, or they actually want to step in and block what a city is doing. I cannot annex if they don't want me to annex, right? And so I understand that frustration, but that's why from the statement that was read, which is actually in my testimony here 2 years later because things haven't changed, is part of the frustration is you've got to go talk to your county folks and say, why aren't you doing a better job of stopping some of these actions that we as citizens in the county don't like that the city is doing? They have that power, they have that authority, it's all outlined in state law, and so we encourage those folks to lean on those county commissioners, and if they're not doing their job, you've got to go address that issue. Again, not come to the legislature and say, solve this problem that could be solved locally. So those are the 2 points I want to make. Like I said, you'll hear probably some more of the nuts and bolts issues from other folks. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Kimberly Savati, if you'd come to the microphone.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It is my pleasure to be here before you this morning on behalf of Kansas Municipal Utilities, and we are here in opposition to House Bill 2025. And so there have been a lot of conversations about the need for this piece of legislation, and I would just offer a slightly different perspective. We aren't necessarily the city, we aren't the county, but we are the local utility in many communities. 118 communities own their own electric utility. About 60 communities also own their own natural gas utility, and all of our communities in the state own and operate their own water and wastewater system. And so the way we are viewing this bill and our concern with this bill is entirely about utility service and providing that service. So we do operate the utilities, KMU. We provide the training for those utility operators on the electric, natural gas, water, and wastewater side. Our membership is reflective of the state of Kansas. We include, our membership includes Kansas City, Kansas Board of Public Utilities, which is the largest water and electric system in the state with roughly 60,000 customers on both sides, all the way down to the city of Radium, which includes a base of roughly 10 customers. So, and then everything in between. The average size of a municipally owned electric utility is 898 customers. So I do really think from that standpoint, we do marry well the difference between more rural communities and more urban communities, recognizing though, however, that our customers are within city limits or within that 3-mile radius. And so we do appreciate the opportunity to provide our comments and do support additional conversation around this subject, because the investments that municipal utilities make to serve their communities are very, very sizable investments, and we do not come at them lightly. So whether it's investing in a new water treatment facility, wastewater facility, new generation units in order to provide power for those customers within city limits and within the dedicated 3-mile radius, which is our dedicated service territory. It is on file at the Kansas Corporation Commission. We have an obligation to serve those customers, not just within city limits, but within that 3-mile radius. It is literally incumbent upon us to provide that service. We make those decisions not for a year or 2 years or 3 years, but we make those decisions for decades out when we're talking about planning and growth. And in some cases, you know, how do we handle communities where there may be declining population? And how do we fund necessary water and wastewater upgrades when we know the population has declined? And how do we make sure that we're not overburdening the customers that remain in that community or in that 3-mile radius with the new required investments? So all of these are very serious and very real balancing acts, and just shifting away quickly would be extremely challenging. And we do believe that the opportunity to have further discussion on this subject, if it were to move forward, would certainly be helpful. So the unintended consequences of advancing this type of legislation on providing utility service is real. And so we just look forward to the opportunity to answer any questions, to be part of an interim, to be part of your further deliberation because of the very real fiscal consequence and utility service capability consequence to your constituents. With that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. We may call on you. Next, we have Dan Warner with the City of Topeka.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, honorable representatives. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on HB 2025. I'm here to provide some nuts and bolts to the particular 3 Mile issue. A little point of clarification first about how the 3 Mile works within Shawnee County and Topeka. So the county, Shawnee County, has zoning authority within the entire county, not just the 3 Mile, not just outside, both. They also have building permit authority within the entire county. What we're talking about here is the division of property, the subdivision of property. That's where the city has authority out to 3 miles. So I'm going to talk about the particulars of why that makes sense for the city in this case. So the city has, within the last few months, been talking to a developer for a new 40-lot subdivision that's adjacent to the city boundary. So that proposed subdivision wishes to connect to city water, city sewer, and will need to be annexed. That is a requirement. So that's a logical development for that area. And also because of the significant investments that have already been made there to serve city neighborhoods in sewer, water, streets, police and fire, just makes sense to get that sort of density in that area. A key component of that development is that the property is available for it. So that brings me to my next point about Shawnee County's platting exemption rules. So the platting exemption, meaning what it takes to divide property without a subdivision plat. So for Shawnee County, the exemption is 3 acres and 200 feet of frontage. So again, if you have 3 acres, 200 feet of road frontage, you can divide your property in Shawnee County without a subdivision plat. So the
Was that 200 feet or 300?
200 feet.
Okay.
So the property I mentioned first is 25 acres, has approximately 1,000 feet of road frontage. So if we look at the platting authority for Shawnee County, the exemption, they could have ended up, that property could have ended up with five lots. And it would be developed in a piano key manner along the frontage. And then that 5 lots in the future is not likely to turn into anything else. It's going to be 5 lots at a density of, 5 lots in 25 acres. So I mentioned earlier, 40 lots. So if that property had been permitted to piano key out 5 lots, it would not be available for this 40-lot subdivision that we're talking about now. So the city took action in 2015 to update or to create an urban growth area and to update the platting authority, the city's platting authority within the 3 Mile and change the exemption rules, made them more stringent. So the goal was to better protect those areas in the 3 Mile that could be available for city growth in the future, really to capture a higher population to share the cost of those services. Remember, we talk about those investments in sewer and water to serve city neighborhoods. You really need people to pay for those things, to pay for the long-term maintenance. Those 5 lots that the city more than likely has no desire to annex in the future and might have to, somebody talked about leapfrogging, we'd have to leapfrog beyond that. Those 5 lots are not going to pay for the long-term maintenance of sewer and water. It's just not going to happen. So perhaps rates have to be raised or whatever. So that's my point there. It's more costly to provide services to that rural residential density than it is to that 40-lot subdivision. You spread those costs over 40 lots, it's much easier to pay. It's cheaper for the developer, and it's better for the maintenance, long-term maintenance for the city. And then one final point about sort of the why. So Topeka, like most cities around the state, has a housing shortage and really need to build more housing within the city, right? So that's one of the ideas here, is to capture that growth within the city. So in summary, the 3 Mile Authority allows cities to plan for fiscally responsible future growth at a density that supports delivery of services. And so the city urges the committee to reject the bill as written.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Jim Benaj is here, Mayor of the City of Bel Air. Thank you, Jim.
Morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I am Jim Benage. I'm the mayor of Bel Air, which is a suburb of Wichita. In case you don't know the geography, that's fine. So I am opposed to this bill, and primarily because I think you need to do more study, as several other people have stated here. I am very supportive of the League of Kansas Municipalities' position on this. I think they've done a good job at laying that out. I'll give you a couple of examples of what we're seeing, and I also gave you a testimony that I think is on your available electronically to all the members here. So just a little explanation of where we're organized. Okay, the county has a county commission that is elected by district. The city is a city council that's elected at large. So we don't have districts, but our city council does not really get involved in zoning outside of the city. But we do get involved in issues that involve zoning that are within the 3 mile area. Our planning commission has two members on it by our bylaws of our planning commission that has to be within that 3 mile zone. They cannot live in the city of Bel Air. They cannot live in any other city. They have to be within the 3 mile zone. And they do a great job at participating in that planning commission. So we had an example, an issue here a few years ago where there's a township called Greenwich Township, which is right adjacent to Bel Air. It's right on our border, actually. There was a person operating a trucking business out of a residence in that township. He got caught. I don't know who caught him, but somebody caught him violating the county zoning for that area because it's residential. You can't have a trucking business residential area. And so he applied to have it changed so that he could get an exception to the zoning for his trucking business. Well, because we're within that 3 mile zone, our planning commission got to review that situation, and they voted against him being able to do that. But it still went back to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a planning organization of Sedgwick County and Wichita, a combined planning organization. So they actually refused that zoning change. It wasn't the city of Bel Air that did it, but we did participate in the decision. So we appreciated that ability to be able to do that because I don't think anybody wants a trucking business in their neighborhood, and somehow I don't know how that got by, but it got stopped. But that was one of the benefits of having that 3 mile zone, and I think we need to maintain that. I have heard a lot of the proponents' testimony here, and I think they do have some legitimate things that need to be discussed, but maybe that's all has to be vetted out in an interim committee, intercession committee, and figured out what's the best avenue, because it is a complex issue, as you can appreciate. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Is there any questions for Mayor Benage? Yes, ma'am. Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, I know you have the process you mentioned going through for that trucking company, but let's say the 3 mile did not exist. Wouldn't it have gone to the county instead to make that same determination?
They made that determination. The county did, yes.
You said it went to the planning instead.
Well, the county has the Wichita and Sedgwick County have a combined planning organization, okay? And that issue did go to that planning commission.
Okay. The same process, I guess, would have occurred regardless if there was the 3 mile rule, correct? Like that didn't really change anything that you would have done. I think you're implying that it would have, and I don't necessarily know that that's true.
It allowed us to give input into the discussion as a city, so.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else? Now, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now I have on WebEx, do we have on WebEx David Dillner? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Thank you, sir, for coming to the meeting and tell us your concern and what you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Today I'm here on behalf of the City of El Dorado to stand in opposition of House Bill 2025. And really the opposition is against eliminating the legislative authority, but to take a moment to do the interim committee to study it in more detail. The primary reason for the extraterritorial zoning, as I understand it, is to enable cities to plan for growth. And as Trey Cocking mentioned from Emporia, not all 3 Mile zoning areas are treated the same. In El Dorado's case, like Emporia, we're kind of pinned in to where we can grow. We have a refinery to our south and we have a lake to our northeast. And so we're really only talking about growing to the north and even to the southwest. The key thing to this legislation is really balance. Understanding that there are rural interests that need to be balanced as well as urban interests. But where we're pinned in our growth pattern, we have to rely on planning in those areas where we're anticipating growth so that we can make those long-term capital investments in a way that is both prudent and cost. The more density that you can get on a particular lot or in a particular, that particular is for, and it makes it more feasible for the municipality to fund and favor of is a that balances those interests, rural and urban, and allows us to prudently
Mr. Dillner, we have lost you. Can you be found? Can you be found? Okay, you're still there, but your data was not working too good. So, are you there? I believe. Do we have his written testimony? If we don't get you back, if you get back later, just give a holler. Okay, we're going to go ahead and proceed with the rest of the hearing. Thank you very much. And now I would like to recognize, are there any questions for any of the opponent testimonies that we've received at this point? Madam Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Ms. Swati.
Yes.
Thanks for being here today. I dug out my notes from the previous hearing and saw that your position has changed from neutral to opponent. Would you like to discuss what precipitated that?
Yes, thank you, Representative, for the question. I do appreciate it. So Kansas Municipal Utilities, we did testify neutral on this piece of legislation 2 years ago, and we are opposed to this bill today, in large part because of the change in the market. And I mean, we have always known that it's incredibly expensive to do our long-term planning and to build out our assets, whether it's investments in new generation or the distribution system or water and wastewater systems. But those costs are ramping up so significantly, and they have in the last couple of years. And knowing that the planning process takes so long, I mean, just to go through the SPP interconnection queue for generation is a 5 to 7 year process. And so, again, we are obligated to serve within that 3 mile service territory. And any changes to the current statute would impact those long-term investments in a significant way. So it is increasingly of concern, just again, the rising costs and ensuring that we have that stability in knowing exactly who we're serving and what we need to do for planning in the future to ensure that service is available. So that necessitated the change. Thank you for the question.
Ma'am, any other questions? I would like to now make a specific point of the people who gave written testimony on both proponents and opponents on this measure. Each one gave effort to write their testimony and to put it into the record, which it is. But I want to recognize each one for, so that of a record, folks know that you did weigh in. And that is for proponents. Written testimony was from Martha Smith of the Kansas Manufactured Housing Association. Debbie Detmer, Kansas GOP delegate. Dale Enyart, Violet Haskett, John Allred, Brad Anderson, Precinct Committeeman, Mary Powell, Karen Augustine, Courtney Crawford, Larry Tawney, Robert Culbertson, Kelsey Mann, Zachary Mann, Ben Kitchens, Stephanie Zimmerman, Janet Pippin, Janie Cruz-Merck, Jan Kimbrell, Melissa McAllister, Carolyn Sims, Christy Upham, Ward Upham, Deanne Munson. I believe that is all we have of proponents written. We also have written for opponents. Josh White, planner of City of Arkansas City. Josh White, same individual, I guess, maybe. Kansas chapter of American Planning Association. Russ Kessler, mayor of Hayesville. Sandy Jacobs, mayor of City of Hayes. James Thatcher, mayor of the City of Clay Center. Terry Summers, mayor of City of Mount Hope. Keel Magnus, city manager, City of Derby. Dick Carter, on behalf of the City of Overland Park. Danielle Doolin, city manager, City of Manhattan. Mark Toom, Kansas Association of Realtors. And also, again, Russ Kessler, mayor of City of Hayesville. Again, I think that's probably a dupe. A look at, and Nathaniel Blank, Watkins Public Strategies, and Misty Dulcimeter, mayor of City of Burton. As the chairman, I just want to really give my regards to all the people, individuals that weighed in on this. You're the ones that bring the issue to light. And because you brought the issue to light, it's very possible that we'll have an interim committee. That decision will be made among leadership. But also, we will be making a final consideration of this measure. If that ends up being that decision in a future day, either in the coming days, if you'll be watching for that. We try not to make instant decisions based on the moment, but to make a deliberation so that we give you due respect. We appreciate the Constitution, and we all got sworn in just a few weeks or almost just days ago to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Kansas. And if we don't use that as our standard, when we've lost our map. And so we appreciate that. And we also encourage, and this is just an encouragement, not an admonition at all, but all of you have already tried to be involved in some way in your counties, your cities, your areas, your neighborhoods, but continue to do so. If you're missing good representation in your county or your city or your area, then encourage people to run, or yourself to run for a planning commission or county commission or any local governmental office, because that's how you get things done. You can sometimes make a difference by making some noise, and you should. But when it comes down to it, as American citizens, we have the right to run, to be a part and to weigh into our communities. So I encourage you to, in the ensuing weeks and months, whatever does happen, whether there's laws change or whether there's interim committee that happens, that you look to keeping your eyes to what's going on in your local community and see what you can do to make a difference in the middle of it all. Just my thoughts. Someone else. Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do kind of have a question, and this would be for the reviser, I think. We did hear this bill 2 years ago. I'm looking here at a quote from a city administrator from Scott City about providing the health, safety, and quality of life for its citizens. And you brought up the Constitution, which made me think, and that was a quote from this committee from this hearing 2 years ago. Has this ever been challenged constitutionally, looking at like the 14th Amendment and providing the same life, liberty, and property protections for all? Because this kind of does have a discrimination factor to it in people that live in that 3-mile rural area.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I don't know of a case off the top of my head challenging this particular statute. I would have to look into it.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? Okay. We are finished with this hearing. We appreciate your attendance, and we'll be in touch. Next Monday to introduce bills. So please be cognizant of that, and we are adjourned.